Turks, everybody. All right. Who doesn't love a studio audience? I love it. All right. Got a packed house in here. Okay, we're going to have an excellent show for you guys today. We're going to do the first hour out of YouTube Space New York. It's powered by Squarespace. We appreciate that. And look at who's next to me. What is this? Kyle Kulinski from SecularTalk. So Kyle's station is what we would call exploding, okay, but in a good way. So not a big deal, just 6 million views a month. Okay, what do we had, 135,000 subscribers or so?
No, I believe it's like 3 trillion last time I checked.
Okay, all right, 3 trillion, all right, not bad. And SecularTalk is, of course, part of the TYT network, one of the 30 channels that we have on, but Kyle is just doing phenomenal work, and he's out of New York, and it was great to be able to do the show with him. We're going to do the second hour out of LA. Anna and Becca are going to do that, and then we're going to do Q&A here live for you guys as we transition to that. So we've got a lot of great stories for you guys, and as usual, we won't get to all of them. But we prepared it in case we actually get to it. Kyle's going to do some, I'm going to do some, and there's been a lot of things that, of course, I've been out for one day, so there's like a million stories I wanted to cover. But we're going to try to hit 8. Let's see what happens, okay? So without further ado, let's get started. Okay. Recent shooting in Waco. 5 biker gangs apparently in a huge war over one another. Apparently they came to this place called Twin Peaks, the restaurant in Waco, Texas, to get along. They were trying to do a peace summit. Didn't work out that way. Now let me give you some of the stats. The stats are bad, and then we'll talk about white-on-white crime, which is a real epidemic in America. So 9 killed, 18 injured, over 170 arrested, over 100 weapons recovered. Okay, so it's already tragic because loss of life is terrible no matter what the circumstances are. We feel terrible about that. Now, law enforcement, curious response here. Now, first of all, they explain how terrible it was. They say, in my nearly 35 years of law enforcement experience, this is the most violent and gruesome scene that I have dealt with. Now, that's the police spokesperson, Patrick Swanton, okay? So obviously horrific, right? I mean, all sides firing at one another. It's like out of a movie, but it's not a movie. It's real life. Those people actually died, 18 people in the hospital, some of them still in bad shape. Now, here's the curious part. CNN says authorities had anticipated trouble and pre-positioned officers. Well, then why did this go down the way that it did? In fact, that same police spokesperson says there were at least 3 rival gang groups here this morning for whatever reason. As they were here, we had officers on scene. We expected issues. Now, okay, I'm usually in the camp that says, hey guys, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback and say, oh, how could this tragedy have been prevented? But one way it could have been prevented is if the officers on the scene didn't let them shoot one another, right? So now, to be fair to the cops, they were a couple of seconds away. They weren't necessarily in the diner when the shooting started, although they arrived quickly thereafter. Now, I'm a bad guy, according to conservatives, right-wing people, you know, sports are the second amendment, etc. I would have taken their guns away, and then you know what would have happened? They wouldn't have murdered one another, okay? And they'd all be alive today. Now, I wouldn't take their guns away forever, like no hunting, etc. But if you've got 5 rival gangs and they've got 100 weapons between them, I mean, this is, like people forget in the Wild Wild West, the reason we had to shoot out at the OK Corral is because you had to surrender your weapon as you entered town. Before town, you got issues, you want to go hunting, kill a rabbit, feed yourself, go ahead and have your gun. But if you're entering town, Wyatt Earp needed your gun because he didn't want people fighting in town. Now we're like, have at it, Hoss, bring in 100 people and do a shootout. This is worse than the Wild Wild West. Now, the second aspect of this is white-on-white crime. Okay, now, people talk about black-on-black crime all the time, but Kyle, let's have a conversation about this. Let's be honest about this, right? So, first of all, can you imagine 5 black gangs get together, okay, in South Central? They bring 100 guns with them.
The cops are totally cool with that.
Yeah, the cops
Go
are...
ahead, guys.
Yeah, the cops are... The cops are on the scene. They say, oh, well, we knew the black gangs had brought 100 weapons and decided that we're just going to see how it plays out.
Compare this to peaceful protesters in Ferguson. They broke out the tear gas immediately when there were peaceful protesters in Ferguson. Here these guys already show up with guns, and the cops are like, let's see where this goes. It may end up somewhere good.
Yeah. Well, it didn't. Now, great article in Huffington Post from Julia Craven about this story. And then there were some tweets about it, et cetera. We were thinking along similar lines, but I want to give her credit because she did a great job with it. She came up with some of the stats. In 2011, 83% of white victims were murdered by other whites. White-on-white crime. Where are the fathers?
Let me just say, Cenk, on behalf of all moderate white people, I would like to apologize for the extremist white people. I know that every time a Muslim does something wrong or a black person does something wrong, you can just generalize about the entire group. But with white people just get a pass. If a white person does something wrong, everybody understands that that person is an individual. And to generalize about everybody else in the white community would be ridiculous. It's just that we don't offer that same mindset to black people and to Muslims and to other minority groups.
Yeah, and now let me fill out the numbers more. 3,172 white people were killed in 2011, unfortunately. 2,630 of them lost their lives at the hands of another white person. I mean, we got to wonder what's going wrong in white culture today. I think it's largely the rock and roll music. I think it's very dangerous. Comedian Carrie Caudette also wrote about this. She writes, in 2013, whites led all other groups in aggravated assault, larceny, theft, arson, weapons carrying, and vandalism. When it comes to sexual assault, whites take the forcible rape cake. They're also more likely to kill children, the elderly, family members, their significant others, and even themselves. And she went on to say, so why is white-on-white crime so prevalent, one may ask? Is it the music they listen to? Is it the white divorce rate, resulting in more white children coming from broken homes? Perhaps it's the TV shows they watch or the violent sports they play. Now, as Kyle pointed out, it sounds absurd. It sounds ridiculous. We don't actually make those arguments. See, those are comedians making the arguments because it's ridiculous. But if it's so ridiculous when it comes to whites, why isn't it equally ridiculous when Fox News gets to say it about blacks day in, day out? When, as Kyle pointed out, most of it is during peaceful protests.
And think about how many people that narrative actually convinces. Like, a majority of the Fox News viewers who hear Bill O'Reilly make similar arguments where he quotes statistics about crime amongst blacks, they hear that and they go, oh, yeah, that sounds totally reasonable. Bill O'Reilly's right. And the takeaway, the implication is, well, blacks are genetically inferior, and here are some numbers that show that. Well, like you just said, you don't hear on MSNBC, they don't quote these numbers and heavily imply that white people are genetically inferior. Yeah. And if they're being objective in how they view it, why wouldn't they do that, right? Because with one set, you're allowed to generalize. With the other set, you're not allowed to generalize.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've got an actual conversation about whether Trayvon Martin was a thug when he's the one that got shot in the chest.
Correct.
He was the victim. And then because he was wearing a hoodie, they called him the thug. I mean,
That's all it takes. That's all it takes to call a black person a thug. Yeah. You have a hoodie, you're a thug. White people, gangs, show up with guns, and they're like, well, these might be upstanding citizens just holding true to their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah. And we had 170 of them arrested. But as you saw in some of the video that we showed there, fairly calmly so, a lot of them sitting there totally unhandcuffed as they get to them. Now, to be fair to the cops, there's a lot of them. It's going to take a while to handcuff them all, right? And 170 of them did get arrested. But there was a lot of sitting around like, oh, okay, let's be fairly calm about this. I mean, again, 5 black gangs with all that weaponry, they would have called in the National Guard. I mean, the water cannons they would have fired, the pepper spray they would have used. I mean, everything imaginable they would have hit them with. It's just amazing how calm they are. Look at these guys. They're just like, oh, okay, all right, well, and then that happened.
Some of them were using their cell phones, too, as the cops were standing there and they were under arrest. Mm-hmm. They're just like going through their Twitter and stuff. The cops are like, it's cool. They're our buddies, it's fine.
But if you ask African Americans throughout the country, when you get arrested, they let you use your cell phone,
Of course, obviously.
Yeah.
But I want to make one more point about this real quick because, again, to go back to the point on race here, What percentage of the Wall Street bankers that caused the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession were white? And how many arguments did you hear from people that the reason why it happened is because of these white people running rampant with their corporate crimes? You never heard it. Virtually all of the Wall Street bankers that crashed the economy were white. Not a single person said maybe it's because they're white. But flip the script. If it's a black person who happens to rob a liquor store or something like that, that's a commonly held belief on the right of, oh, maybe it happened because they're genetically inferior and that's just who they are.
Well, to be fair, when you rob a liquor store, you can get dozens of dollars.
As opposed to 83,000 mortgages of families with predatory loans.
Yeah. No, and it's like they'll talk about toxicology reports. Well, we found out he had marijuana in his system 7 days ago. Right.
Hate that.
Did we ever test the bankers for cocaine in their system?
Oh.
I don't remember that.
They stop and frisk Wall Street bankers all the time, Jank. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. We are doing the show out of New York, so we'll end it right there.
The lights cut off.
Right, yeah. All of a sudden, Google's funders pulled the plug. Do they have funders, or do they fund the whole planet? Okay. All right. Let's go on to a serious story here. We've got a tragic story of terrorism that we've got to report to you guys, and it's not good news. Let me show you the guy who did it, Sheikh Jilani. He is the Imam of Muslims of America, and boy, what they were planning. Now, luckily, they didn't get to have this actually happen because the cops caught him, so thank God they didn't get to execute their plans. This was going to happen in a small town in New York. Here's what he said. Our small group will soon be faced with the fight of our lives. We will offer those lives as collateral to prove our commitment to our God. We shall be warriors who will inflict horrible numbers of casualties upon the enemies of our nation and world peace. Wow, they're even against world peace. Now, let me show you one of the victims here. His name is Robert Dugard. This is the guy that they were going to target, and it just breaks our heart to say a good guy out of Tennessee. And he even ran for congressional office. So let me tell you more that they were going to do to him because it's really horrible. They said, when we meet with this state, okay, the people that we will seek will know who we are. We will be cruel to them, and we will burn down their buildings. Wow, Jesus. Now, they talked about how to execute this operation. They said the operation in mind requires about 20 expert gunners. Target 3 is vulnerable from many approaches. So this is they've planned this out and must be utterly destroyed in order to get the attention of the American people. This looks like a jihad of the worst sort, right? Now, finally, it's about to get more graphic. They also said, if it gets down to the machete, we will cut them to shreds. Now, that's weird, right? Because we haven't heard a lot about this in the national news, this kind of terrorist strike against a good, upstanding citizen. You would think that this would be news 24/7, right? Oh, right, I got one little thing wrong in the story. It turns out the terrorist was Robert Dugard, and the victim was Sheikh Jilani. So that's the guy who ran for office in Tennessee against Desjardins, ran for Congress, and he planned to victimize the Muslims of America in New York, who is partly led by this guy. So that was the victim you're looking at. Isn't that amazing? Let me give you more details what they plan to do against this Muslim community in upstate New York. Court documents showed Dugard discussed employing a variety of weapons in the attack, including M4 military-style rifles, pistols, Molotov cocktails, explosives, and the aforementioned machete. So they had planned to go in there with snipers, kill people, burn down the buildings. They said, if we got to kill the civilians, well, we got to kill the civilians because they were, according to their own words, literally against world peace. Yet, crickets from the national media. Nothing, almost unheard. This amazing story of a Republican politician who ran for office recently who planned to massacre this community in New York.
Well, Cenk, you're forgetting a very important fact. White conservative people cannot be terrorists by definition.
I knew I was forgetting something.
No, but this is actually a really serious and a really important point to make because I know just from doing my show that over the past year, maybe 2 years, I've covered maybe 3 or 4 different right-wing terrorist attacks or attempted terrorist attacks that got absolutely no coverage whatsoever in the mainstream media. In fact, let me ask the audience here real fast. How many of you guys have heard of a group called Sovereign Citizens? Okay, maybe 10% of the audience, but I'm stretching there. Probably less than that.
No, it's a good Young Turks audience. That was a quarter. I'm going to give you a quarter.
Well, Sovereign Citizens are one of the biggest terrorist groups in the United States of America. Now, that's not my opinion. That's actually a fact. There was a 2009 Department of Homeland Security study which found that, and it was commissioned under the Bush administration, so there's no liberal bias here. And they found that 56% of terrorist attacks in America are from right-wing groups, one of the leading ones being Sovereign Citizens. Not to mention neo-Nazis, not to mention KKK, not to mention any other groups. So the problem is the media has a set narrative that they run with, and if anything deviates from that narrative, they just don't cover it. And the narrative is Muslims are terrorists because the Muslims are always the terrorists, and the conservative people are not terrorists because they can never be terrorists. So this is why you get this skewed perception of the American people where a lot of them genuinely believe, no, it's only Muslims are terrorists. It's only Muslims because that's all I see, because that's all CNN shows me.
And to just take it one step further, it's that when they see this, they're not bad people. So, like, I mean, at Fox News, they're bad people. Right? but at CNN, there isn't a room full of producers that
it's
go...
not a conspiracy.
Yeah, they go, oh, let's go get the Muslims. Right? And they don't see the Duggard story and think like, oh, let's cover that up. Let's not bother white folks. Right? I think that what they've internalized.
That's right. It's
and
a subconscious bias is what
That's
it is.
right. And so what winds up happening is they think, oh, well, that's a lone wolf. That's just one crazy guy. It's not a national story.
Right.
It's just a crazy guy in Tennessee who, by the way, was conspiring with dozens of other people, right? And he's now accepted a plea agreement, so he's convicted, and so he's guilty, and there's conversations with him on other... Did they go and get the conspiracy? And think about that, too. Imagine that a Muslim guy had planned to kill an entire town in Hancock, New York.
Oh, Fox News would have an orgy.
And conspired with many other people, right? And they'd be like, where are the authorities? Where's the Justice Department? Why haven't they arrested every single person involved in that conspiracy? Why haven't they tapped their phones? Why haven't they gone after them? My God, Obama's not doing anything. It's all Obama's fault. But the guy at CNN sees this, goes, oh, lone wolf. The next time he sees a Muslim attack, goes, there's the Muslims again. Let's talk. This is a national issue. This is a national issue. Let's all talk about it, right? So now, okay, but at this point, you're all thinking, well, at least this guy got convicted, right? He took the plea deal, and so, boy, they threw the book at him. So let me read you from Talking Points memo. He ultimately signed an agreement under which he would enter a guilty plea to a single charge of interstate communication of a threat and was released from custody on $30,000 bond. That guy is out in the streets right now. Now, he's sentencing is coming up, and he could face up to 5 years and a $250,000 fine. Okay, he's out. Can you imagine? A Muslim says, I'm going to kill a whole town with my machete because of my God. Those are the literal quotes from Duggard, right? And they say, oh, all right, well, you're free to go, but make sure you show up at trial. Right? So the hypocrisy is overwhelming. I mean, I've got literally 60 cases here. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll just give you the case of Iman Ferris, right? And there are worse tragedies and injustices, and I don't give a damn about him, and he's a bad guy. But to give you context, right? This idiot thought he was going to take down the Brooklyn Bridge with a blowtorch, okay? Literally, that was his plan, blowtorch, okay? He's going to get out there really early in the morning, though, okay? He called off the attack, okay? Because I don't know, maybe he realized it was a really dumb idea, right? We knew he called off the attack. He got 20 years, okay? 20 years. This guy is talking about snipers, has strategic planning on how they're going to attack the town and how they might have to machete the civilians. He's out on bond. Now, you tell me that there is no hypocrisy, there's no double standard, and that in America, everybody gets treated equally, no matter what their race, religion, or background is. It's just not the case. I want it to be the case. I want to help the country get there, and that's why we have this conversation. But right now, we ain't there.
Not only that, but there's a really a really big issue here to point out, which is that we're so not objective in what we fear. So even to the actual lone gunman things that happen, there are 32,000 gun deaths in America every single year on average. Every year. That includes everything. Homicide, suicide, accidents, you name it. But nobody has a conversation about that at all because you can't really blame the group you want to blame in that scenario. So therefore, we don't discuss gun reform in any serious way. Congress doesn't care about it whatsoever. With a right-winger who plans an attack, don't discuss that. Don't address it in any serious way. The only time everybody seems to get outraged and angry is if it's Muslims. If Muslim terrorists were responsible for 32,000 deaths in America every single year, what would the response be? We'd invade Jordan, Yemen, Syria, name every single country.
Are you kidding me? We'd be knee-deep in Malaysia right now. All right. Yeah, Kyle's got the next story for you guys. We're going to lighten it up a little bit. Now, it also touches on religion and pot. And there's also hypocrisy. You can sense a theme here. This is the double standard segment of the Young Turks. But it's a little bit lighter. All right, go ahead.
That's right. Okay, so there's a man in Indiana named Jerome Scott, and he was sentenced to 18 months probation for felony distribution charges after police found 150 marijuana plants at his home when they were investigating for a robbery. So here's where the story gets really interesting. He's moving with his wife to Michigan to legally grow medical marijuana, and he has a permit for that. And on top of that, he's also a Rastafarian. So he said, quote, "Cultivating my own cannabis is my way of not contributing to the black market and drug dealing tactics. In my natural state, I don't believe I'm breaking any law. I know I'm not harming anyone or causing any harm to the community." So Scott pleaded guilty to one Class D felony count of possession, which means his license will not be renewed next year to grow marijuana legally, which means that his only source of income now is gone. And he also says that he now lost a key aspect of his faith because he actually is a Rastafarian. This isn't just somebody saying that so that they could smoke weed. He truly believes. So now he's essentially making the Hobby Lobby argument. He's saying, why would you be able to take this away from me? This is my religious freedom.
It's an open and shut case. I'm sure Scalia would agree. I'm sure all the conservatives would agree, right? So now, look, you can say, hey, Cenk, Kyle, we don't agree with you guys on legalizing marijuana. We don't think there should be medicinal marijuana in Michigan. And he was caught in Indiana, so his permit in Michigan, although perfectly legal in that state, does not apply to Indiana. Okay, those are all interesting and fair points. But Hobby Lobby told us that if you have a religious objection, you don't have to follow the rules that everybody else has to follow. You just have to have a legitimate religious objection. And Rastafarian is a religion that's been around a long time. Smoking weed is part of the religion, okay? It is, okay? I'm thinking of converting. But in reality, that is his religion. It's inarguable. It's inarguable. I can't wait for Scalia to set him free.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, isn't it amazing? So in Hobby Lobby, they say, well, look, good Christians, if they want to not serve gays, you got a religious objection, you know what I'm saying, right? But this guy, Rastafarian, does that really count? Yeah, the Constitution says that you can be any religion you like and that you're not going to discriminate against any religion. They've got to set him free. They've got to.
What's so amazing about the Hobby Lobby decision is that if you read Scalia's take on it, he very clearly admits that he's a hypocrite. Because he says, I'm only going to apply this kind of reasoning to employers taking away birth control from their employees. And he's very specific. And Ginsburg basically responded and said, dude, you're an idiot. You can't do that. Because it doesn't make sense to say, okay, you're allowed religious liberty, but only when I say you're allowed religious liberty, and, oh, look, it only applies to the areas where my political beliefs say it can apply. But let's go further here, because just this idea of religious liberty in general, I honestly think it's a little ridiculous, because you only have religious liberty insofar as you're not violating rational secular laws. So, for example, do you have does your religious liberty mean that you can tell your employees, I don't believe in vaccination, so you can't get vaccinated? Or can you say something like, because of my religion, I get to sacrifice a goat every day on my front lawn. Well, I get to sacrifice a human. There are religions that have existed throughout history that truly believe in human sacrifice.
Well, the goat was kind of badass, but you lost me on the humans.
But see, that gets the bigger point here is, I don't think that this guy should be able to smoke weed because it's his religion. I think this guy should be able to smoke weed because you should be able to smoke weed.
Right. Well, so here's my take on that. Of course, I agree with that, and legalize it. Go weed. But you've got to be consistent. You've got to be at least internally consistent, or let's all agree. I mean, national press covering this, everybody covering this. From now on, Scalia, Roberts, Alito, Thomas, all these guys, if they don't free Jerome Scott, they're the world's largest hypocrites. They don't mean religious freedom. They mean only for Christians, only our religion, right? Now, look, Jerome's actually out on probation, so he's not physically in a jail cell now, which actually kind of makes him lucky in some sense, because there's a lot of guys, some guys serving life sentences for smoking marijuana, right? But he does have a felony on his record now, and that's why he can't do the business that he was going to do in Michigan, as Kyle told you. So let's do free Jerome Scott T-shirts, right?
I'm all for it.
Yeah, and if you're not going to do that, well, then go ahead and piss off with your Hobby Lobby, okay? Then you don't get to go around telling me, oh, I got a religious objection to gay people. You can't have both. It's got to be one or the other. Okay. Are we not merciful? I'm giving you a choice, right? Okay. Now, a tiny bit more about religion. Now, this story doesn't start well, but I'll give you a tease. It ends well. Okay? All right. So, let me tell you who this is about. So, I'm going to need this piece of paper. Okay. So there's a guy named Mike Percy. He's out in Las Vegas. He's part of a church that should clearly be helping him because it's called Abundant Living Las Vegas. Okay? First of all, that's an awesome name for a church to begin with. Like, they're in Vegas, and it's called Abundant Living. Okay? All right. I hope you do well in the slots. Anyway, so Mike's got a serious issue. He's been in a wheelchair for over 3 decades. He had an accident at the age of 27, and he can't walk. Now, he's a really religious guy, so he prays and prays. And, you got those snake oil salesmen out there, Pat Robertson, who are always like, oh, you've got a chin ache. It's now cured, right? Well, dude, cure Mike, okay? But they never do that, right? Because they can't do that. But then a friend of his sends him a video and says about yoga and how it can actually start to build some of your muscles. And for people who haven't been able to walk, they can actually begin to take some steps. So that's amazing. So he starts to do that. And guess what? It works. It's phenomenal, right? So it's not like he's now, dancing around and running, marathons, etc. But look, he's now can walk. His record is 274 steps taken overall, 65 in a row without assistance. I love this story, right? So this has helped him. So, and obviously, his church is going to help him out here. He's been going to this church the whole time, right? No. So he was looking for some assistance here, and with the help of some of his friends, set up a GoFundMe site. This is what happened next. When friends set up a GoFundMe page to help Mitch cover income lost during the time he was working with Mike, most parishioners refused to contribute. Now, Mitch is a guy who is the born-again Christian yoga instructor. So Mitch Menick is saying, hey, look, man, I took time out of my career to help him, which he did, and it worked. Isn't that amazing? Can you help out a little bit? And he's born again, and so he's like, hey, guys, help me out with this, at this church that I've been going to my whole life. And they're like, no, sorry, no can do, because yoga is the work of the devil. They're not kidding. Okay, so now we've covered on the show before, Pat Robertson says yoga opens the door for demons. Okay, I mean, you're doing downward dog, and the dogs are rushing in. The hounds of hell are rushing in. Okay, so let me quote a different church because I really like this, and I like their name too: the Apologetics and Research Ministry. They're already being apologists, and they say it. That's where we are. Okay, anyway, they say, your body will most likely become much more flexible by doing yoga. Well, that's good. And so will your mind. Okay, great. As one can see, yoga is more than just a physical exercise. We as Christians do not want to make our mind more flexible. We do not want to leave our mind open to false teaching.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is the exact kind of fundamentalism that's really, really dangerous. Because what they're saying is, I'm going to reject this empirical reality, which is a good thing. Can anybody argue that this guy walking is not a good thing? You can't argue that. But what these guys say is, I genuinely don't give a shit. I don't care that he can walk. I'd rather him accept Jesus and be in pain and be in a wheelchair. That's dangerous, man, because think about where else that could lead to. When you're that irrational, where are you going to end up next? Who knows what it could end up with?
Well, you see, the thing is, they view it as a competing philosophy. Or, so they think like, well, if yoga works, maybe the Hindus are right.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Yeah, and they think that yoga, well, it originally comes from the same culture as Hinduism, and they think that the many gods in Hinduism are all demons and devils and shaitans and whatever else they call them, right? And so they think, okay, downward dog is some sort of dude down in Hades, right? And this is the Hindus trying to open your mind. Oh, look down, look down. Oh, yeah, we got you, right? So they think, well, that voodoo worked. That's an even bigger threat, right?
That's right.
Because we were the guys who were supposed to corner the market in healing you. In Mark, they talk about healing you. Jesus heals, right? In Acts of the Apostles, Peter uses Jesus' name to heal someone who was lame. So they're like, no, you're getting in on our scam. We don't like this.
That's right.
It's a competing racket.
This is why Pat Robertson is genuinely scared of Dungeons and Dragons and Harry Potter.
Yeah, no, he talks about it.
I'm not joking. He's spoken about that on the 700 Club, where he says kids don't play Dungeons and Dragons, don't read Harry Potter, because he really believes he believes it's competition to his nonsense. A book that admits that it's fictional. He goes, I think you have a better argument than I do.
Well, Roger Goodell's been really worried about Quidditch lately. So, but isn't that, so look, we're obviously secular. The guy's show's named SecularTalk, right, in Kyle's case. But isn't that a wonderful admission of their defeat?
It makes my job so easy.
Yeah,
I don't need to provide a counter-argument. I just have to quote what they say, show it back to them, and they go, that does look pretty unreasonable.
They believe they're competing with Harry Potter. We win. Okay. Now, in this case, it actually ends somewhat well. The pastor of the church says, you know what? I'm a little bit more open-minded. And I love his quote on this. He says, I'm not going to stand in the way or limit how God speaks to people. In the Bible, God speaks through a donkey. Right? So it's not, he's like, I don't know, the Ganesh thing, and, if God can speak through a donkey, maybe he can speak through an elephant. Yoga's not about Hinduism in America. Nobody goes to yoga like, oh, man, I can't wait to get up on the Upanishads, right? And the reason it worked isn't because Ganesh is more powerful than Jesus. It worked because it's physical exercise. You exercise those muscles, and they get stronger, and then you've got a chance, right? So he said, hey, guys, go ahead and help these guys out. And half the church actually did wind up giving to the GoFundMe campaign. Some of the people in the church left the church entirely because they were disgusted that this guy could walk now without the help of Jesus, okay? So that part doesn't end well. But a lot of them did fund the campaign. They were good Christians. And even though we might not agree with Christianity, there are great, great Christians in the world, and they believe in the power of helping others, helping the needy, etc. And they did in this case. And I'm going to leave you with a good quote from Bob Perry, who's the pastor of the church. He says, some people wanted me to condemn Mike's yoga, but I'm not the one to judge. My job is to teach people how to search for God, not to step in and be God for them. I think it would really help people if people trying to have a relationship with God rather than trying to be God. If Mike is at peace, then I am with him. Way to go, Bob Perry. All right. See, there's a pastor who actually cares about his flock, who loves his flock, and who wants God to help them no matter how he arrives. So that's a Christian I can love. So that's our first segment. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And when we come back, we'll make fun of Chris Christie.
That was a segment from hour one of the show.
Now for the better hour, the second hour.
Drums. You can get the whole show on TYTnetwork.com.